Hi, it's John from A is for Alcoholic. I wanted to welcome you to our very first interview. Very exciting stuff for me. I hope it is for you too. So, I got a chance to sit down with George Haymaker III, founder of Rethink Ice Cream, and talk about recovery. And it was great. He was very kind, very inspiring, had some really cool things to say about spirituality, prayer practices, rituals, all the things that keep us sober. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. Sitting here with George Haymaker III, founder of Rethink Ice Cream. And maybe you can start by just telling me what is Rethink Ice Cream? Why they would want to have this versus something else.
Well, maybe I can just start off by talking about the name
Sure.
and the genesis of it, how it came to be. Because when we made the ice cream, we were looking for what to call it, how to brand it. And the name goes back to when I was hitting my bottom. And literally I was at my home in Napa, and I'd scared my wife and my puppies off. They had driven down to LA because they didn't want to be around me. And I was in my bathroom, and my cousin had killed himself. He was also a substance abuser. And I was going to reenact his death in my bathroom. And that was my bottom. And so at that moment, I was kind of forced into a place where I had to rethink everything in my life. And so I had a meeting at that point with my higher power, and he gave me a choice. It was either die or turn things around. And so that's where the name came from. Rethink was a matter for me, rethinking everything in my life, including what I put into my body. So we've taken that experience of mine, and what we ask consumers to do is just rethink how they view ice cream, that it can be part of a healthy lifestyle. And so there's more to how the ice cream came to be, but I know that we're here to talk about recovery, so
Yes.
That's what I'd prefer to do.
Yeah, absolutely. How long did you drink for? Like, when did you start? What was the first time you started drinking alcoholically?
Yeah, so I started in college. I was pretty much a good boy before that. I was an uncomfortable kid, and we can get into why I think I drank, which I'll do in a second. But I started in college, and when I checked into my freshman dorm, there was parties everywhere, and first thing I know, I'm across the hall with some new friends of mine, and they introduced me to Four Roses whiskey, and I ended up getting smashed on it and could never drink brown liquor again. But that was the first time I drank, and it just went off from there. I drank till I was 50 in varying degrees. I was kind of a binge drinker, still functional in my professional life, but never really comfortable with myself, and so I used substances to kind of bring comfort, emotional comfort to myself.
Yeah. And you said this was because of things earlier on
Yeah.
as a kid?
I mean, most of us in recovery that have been in the rooms, we hear the stories, and 9.9 times out of 10, it's people that are uncomfortable in their own skin, and there are things that they're trying to get away from, and a lot of it traces back to childhood. A lot of dysfunction, broken homes, abuse of one sort or another, things that scar a young child, and they just don't learn how to cope with it. And that was my case, where we moved every year, so I was always having to say goodbye to friends and meet new friends, so having to change environments. And then there was some sexual abuse from some older boys in one of the neighborhoods I lived in. So a combination of all those things gave me the impression of myself that I wasn't worthy and that something was wrong with me. And so I was uncomfortable, and I didn't know it. I acted out a lot. I got angry, and that was just a byproduct of being uncomfortable. And the more I acted out, the more trouble I got into with my parents and abuse, and so it was just kind of an evolving thing that I found a solution, and that's the solution I carried with me until it didn't work anymore, and I hit a wall.
I don't
At
know.
the end, I was doing 50 Vicodins a day, 10 milligram Norcos, and I wasn't getting anything from it except just being able to calm the shakes and the beginnings of the withdrawals. I was just trying to baseline. And like I said, I was just hanging on. There was really no high to it. There was just trying to keep my body from shutting down and withdrawing.
And you were married, you were working.
Oh yeah, fairly high achieving, executive of various businesses that I owned and operated, and I was holding it somewhat together that respect, but it was coming to an end where it was starting to bleed through in my behavior, and you just can't hide stuff like that.
Not for long.
No, not for long. So I had to do something about it. I mean, I knew it. The handwriting was on the wall. My wife was telling me she was leaving me. It was just, and I just made a decision at that moment that I didn't want to go out this way. I didn't want my life to stand for what it was becoming. I had zero meaning in my life. I felt very little. I had shut down my emotions long ago to not feel the hurt that I had felt as a child. And, fortunately I had that experience with what became my higher power, to where I was literally brought to my knees in that bathroom and just begging for help. And like I said, I feel it was an intervention by God that gave me this choice, that I could either turn my life around and make it stand for something meaningful, or just, go the direction I was going, which was
down the drain.
Which was down the drain. Yeah.
Can I ask you about your higher power?
Yeah.
Did you feel spiritual at all before? Were you brought up in any sort of
No.
religious construct or anything like that?
No. So I've got a real interesting story on that. So zero religious background, zero spiritual background, which is part of the reason I had no meaning in my life. It was all about accumulating. It was all about working. My dad was my idol, and he worked hard, so I just wanted to grind. And like I said, I got to this dead end, and I just stood for nothing. And when I got to one of my questions that the spiritual advisor asked me, says, what does your life mean? What's the meaning in your life? And I began to tell him what I did for a living. He just kind of chuckled, and it became readily apparent to me that that's not what he was looking for. So, there were a few key moments in rehab and a lot of key moments in recovery where different things happened that began to put the building blocks in place that brought me to this point. So I, entered AA right from the beginning, and for a while it was just all about not drinking and doing the steps and just doing what I was told and learning the AA program. But that last component, that spiritual component, was one I just couldn't get. I mean, I'm a very cerebral person. I can figure things out. I'm fairly smart, and I kept trying to figure out this God thing. And the thing that I came to realize is that you don't figure out the God thing, you feel the God thing. And so the problem with me was I never felt anything. So I had to get out of my head and get into my heart. And that is the number one thing that has caused the change in my life, and for recovery to be successful for me, is that I lead life through my heart now. And so it was a matter of being able to understand, it wasn't an understand intellectually thing, it was an actual opening of the heart and experiencing life through the heart, and getting in touch with my soul, which lies behind the heart. And so a key moment in my recovery was at my next rehab. The counselor walked me outside, and he put me on a bench, and it was in a beautiful setting. and the sun was shining, and he said, okay, what I want you to do is sit here and shut your brain off and just get in touch with things that that are most meaningful to you in life. So for me, it was my parents, my two puppies, things that brought me to an emotional state. And so I sat there and just got in touch with that, and began to get tears in my eyes because of the state I was in, and just how much I didn't want to lose those things that meant something to me. And my heart began to open. And then I just sat there with an open heart and asked God to come into me. And that was the first moment that I began to experience what it meant to live life, live a moment with an open heart and not through my head. And then I just had to then practice that, because spirituality is a practice, and I just had to practice and make that my pursuit. And that's what it is. You know, you get on the spiritual path and you pursue it. It's a lifelong pursuit of enlightenment, or something that resembles enlightenment. But it's a path that you're on. It's not. There is no finish line. There is no getting there.
You don't graduate.
It is a lifestyle, yeah. And that's what I had to get my head around, is that this was no longer about drinking for me. Drinking is the price of admission to get into recovery. You cannot drink and be in recovery, because it just doesn't lend itself to the lifestyle. But for me, recovery couldn't be about just not drinking. That wasn't enough. There wasn't enough satisfaction in that. There wasn't enough reward in just not drinking. I had to pursue something that was more meaningful, and so I've been able to do that through understanding that with an open heart, I can get really comfortable, and I can get my new high by enriching my soul. And so that is what life has become for me, is that I live life through my heart. Not to say that my brain doesn't make noise and I get thoughts and it doesn't get in my way, but every time it does, I recognize, okay, my brain is starting to run my life again. And when I say the brain, I mean the ego, which is which is what lives in the mind. It's what creates all this noise and all this discomfort for us.
Yes.
So I can recognize it immediately when it's happened. I redirect my energy back down into my heart. I make sure that it's open, and I always live life through my heart. The only thing I use my head for anymore is information. I use it to multiply 2 times 2. I use it to read a map to get to John's house. But I don't ever act on an idea or a thought that comes through my head without running it through the filter of my heart. If my heart thinks it's a good idea, then maybe I'll act on it. But I never do anything just by the virtue of what travels through my 2 ears.
Well, I think that's good advice for anybody in recovery, and I know that it's still, and I'm still only at 3 years. You know, that the God thing is so difficult for people, and I don't know if you've created any sort of persona, or if you've given it a name. I know a lot of people do that.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I have some good input on that. So I don't make. Now, God has never spoken to me. I haven't heard the words, but I've felt a ton of energy from God. When my heart is open and I'm relating to what God stands for, and that to me is what God is. It's a set of principles, godlike principles, holy principles, that we all understand God to mean. And so God, typically means, we, not I. It's harmony. It's kindness, compassion, it's love, it's caring, it's doing unto thy neighbor the way that as you'd want them to do to you. It's all the things that we attribute to holiness and right, and so what I do is I just liken God to those principles, and I just live my life according to those principles. And when I do, I get direct feedback through my open heart into my soul that there's approval. I believe strongly that God created us to be kind, loving, and compassionate. And the reason we feel so good when we do that is because that's the way God designed us. He makes us feel good when we help others, when we're caring and kind, and he makes us feel like crap when we're greedy, when we're selfish, when we're hating. We don't feel good about ourselves. And so he's giving us, if we open our hearts and listen by feeling the feedback that we're getting in terms of how we feel, then we know immediately whether we're living according to God's will. God's will is what makes us feel right in our souls. God's will is not what makes our ego feel good.
No. So that bad feeling is nothing more than a call to course correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey,
Yeah,
this doesn't feel good. You need to try something else.
right, but we have to listen to the feedback. So to your point, I've never heard God speak to me. I've never heard the English word, but I've heard a ton of feedback. And you know, when I'm doing the right thing or when I'm trying to help somebody, I can get goosebumps. And that to me is the energy. I mean, energy is everywhere. I mean, to me, God is everywhere. There's just this energy field that travels throughout the entire universe that represents everything that's right in the world. If we open our hearts and let it flow into us, we will get signals that tell us we are on the right course. We are behaving the way that God would want us to.
So, how do you get from the bathroom floor into your first rehab to find? So, this moment of clarity, or this moment, it happened in the second rehab. Is this correct?
Yeah, I had gone to a rehab about 6 months before, and it just, you know, it didn't stick. And I thought I could still manage it. I was still trying to figure out a way. I didn't put everything I had into that first rehab. And so I had another bottom I needed to hit. But through that period, my family had been very involved in wanting to help me. And so to answer your question, you know, they had set me up at this next rehab. And so I had a lot of help. I had people that looked out for me and loved me and wanted me to do the right thing. And I just somehow surrendered to enough of a degree that I was willing to take a suggestion. If I showed up Monday morning bright and early at Altamira in Sausalito and stayed there for 60 days. And the first rehab, I was still working on my job, and I would run from a class to do my work. And so when I went to Altamira, it was doing nothing but focusing on recovery. I did the first 8 steps during those 60 days. I found my sponsor who came to speak at the rehab, and I dove in 100%. And that was, you know, recovery is not a 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Maybe I'll try it. It's not, unless you are fully committed with your heart and you're ready for this entire change in lifestyle, to me, you won't be successful long term. You know, it's just all about leaving what was behind and finding a new way, a healthy way.
Yeah, I know. And like I don't even think that I was 100% when I was going through the steps, because I remember them being so difficult and so challenging. And I don't want to say I did it all on my own, because that's certainly not the truth, but I did not go to any sort of facility or anything. But I just remember it being so difficult.
The reason, if I can express my opinion, the reason it felt hard is because you were still resisting. And the thing that's the expression of resistance to doing the steps when they felt hard. And your ego is screaming and kicking because you are threatening it that you are going to leave it behind and no longer allow it to run your life. So that's where that resistance comes from. And then, you know, to me, you just, you know, your heart won over. The ability to allow your heart to take control of your life. You know, and that's, I think, what happens in recovery is that the heart becomes bigger and the mind becomes less, everything quiets down, and we just stop resisting stuff, you know, we don't fight it anymore.
And I'll have these thoughts where there's something I should do, or a certain way I should behave with somebody in a relationship or just in life. And if I ever have that feeling like, oh man, I don't want to do this, it usually means that that's what I'm supposed to do. So I kind of, that ego is still there somewhere going like, yeah, you shouldn't do that. That's too hard. That's not good for us.
Right.
And it's like, well, that probably means that I need to go through that or do that thing, you know?
The ego doesn't leave us, right? When we're in recovery, it's still there. It's part of our, body, so to speak. It's never going to, we can't get rid of it. We can't do a lobotomy. But what we can do is again, shift the focus within us so that by exercising the heart and infusing spiritual goodness into our soul, that swells and becomes bigger and becomes bigger than the ego. So the ego retreats. Because that ego, as we know, is always going to look for the opportunity to say, oh, I can do this, I've got this, or, oh, we can go drink, or whatever it might say to you.
Yeah.
It's always going to look for that opportunity. So to me, it's, that's why it's a daily.
I always put it akin to, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, remember the movie A Beautiful Mind?
Yeah.
With Russell Crowe. And at the end, he's got the people who are in his head that are kind of over there like, hey, if you want, we're still here. You can talk to us.
Right.
And so that's where those thoughts of, where the ego lives for me now and kind of, or I try to keep them as far away. They're still there. They still let me know.
Yeah.
Temptations, your ego, would feel really good right now. And it's like, I know you're still there. I've got more important things to do.
Yeah.
Not today, I
Yeah.
guess is really the biggest thing. And that sort of idea of, I mean, I can't imagine it's overwhelming. This idea that I'm just going to change my entire life. And, you talk about, well, we can't get a lobotomy, and this sort of epiphany or this, like when they talk about a spiritual change, and for some people in recovery, it happens like that, right? And other people, what's the word of it? It's the educational variety. And so slowly this like personality change or that's just another simpler word for like a spiritual awakening.
Right.
Is that, how I was before is not how I am now.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know if when you were drinking, how was your personality different than it is today? Like what things was, and I I get it. Was it anger? Was it, like, what were the things that you gave up?
Yeah. So I was angry. I was a very reactionary person.
Mm-hmm.
You would get in my space, you would do anything or say anything that crossed ways with me, and I would react. I would see an email from somebody that I didn't like, and I would fire off a response. I didn't pause. I didn't think about what the repercussions were. I'd like to say that I'm calm, I'm thoughtful. I feel serene. I don't react. I've received the gift of pause, and that is, my sponsor taught me to always ask myself 3 questions. Does it need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? And does it need to be said right now? So the reactionism is gone. I'm able to just kind of, the other thing and this is not an indictment on humanity necessarily, but I've come to realize that people are just flawed by nature. And now I can just sit back and view the world more peacefully, in that all I have to do is align myself with God's principles, the way that I discussed. If I'm in alignment with those principles and everybody else around me is reacting in cross ways to those, I can just let them do that. And I just stay here, aligned with those principles, and I'm good.
And you talk about those principles. I know that, and the steps, and my sponsor was one of the things he said, because I was very skeptical, very, very skeptical. And I went in there in my mind, I was just investigating this, like, what's this all about? I don't really know, and so he said something to me that stuck, and he's like, it's kind of like life, the missing manual. And I don't know, you mentioned being uncomfortable as a kid. I certainly didn't feel like the people in my life that I thought should be mentors and teachers, they weren't there for me. And so I can't believe how much I didn't learn growing up. And then to stop drinking and to actually talk to somebody who was like, hey, try this instead of this. Nobody had ever told me that. The only people that I found were people who like to have fun, who like to go out, who like to drink, who like to, do drugs and let's party and that kind of thing. And so that sort of eye-opening thing where it's like, oh, there is another way. Right. I can't believe it.
Right.
So
it's hard to know that until you experience the fruits from that other way. Mm-hmm. And that's, when I'm sitting in rehab and detoxing, and all I've ever known was that one way, and I've never experienced any of the fruits from living the right way. You're walking out a plank into the unknown, because you don't know. You hear people stand up there and talk about, oh my God, my life's been turned around and I can't believe how good it is. And you hear these people that have been in recovery for a while, and you're looking at them thinking, okay, well, I hope they're right. I mean, I see that, but I don't know how they got there, and I don't even know how to get there. And so for me, it was beginning to practice doing what I was told, beginning to practice once I was able to open my heart and begin to feel some stuff and beginning to practice some spirituality. Little by little, I began to get the fruits of what I was doing, and I began to feel good, moments of goodness. And so I said, wow, I always took note. I always paid attention to what was going on, because you can't miss these signals. You can't miss these things that are happening, because they're just little treats that come along the way that you build upon. I learned how to pray by, building a ritual around going to the bathroom. Every time I would go pee, I would do a prayer. And that was my way of putting prayer into my life.
So yes, the importance of daily rituals and having things that you do on a regular basis. I mean, I imagine you're similar in that when I was drinking, everything was chaos. It didn't matter. The only thing was how I was going to get to that drink, whether it was, and I don't know where you got, whether it was a bottle of vodka underneath the bed, or if I was going to have to drive to the grocery store or the other grocery store so that the people at the first one didn't see me, and all that kind of that sneaky behavior.
Yeah, I mean, there was a Rite Aid on Amola Street in Napa that I frequented just about every morning at 7 o'clock, because I would drink my way through my inventory from the previous day, and hiding it at all my hiding spots that my wife already knew about. But yeah, so I showed up at Rite Aid pretty much, and that's an embarrassing thing, shoveling up to the Rite Aid checkout stand at 7 in the morning with a couple of plastic bottles of, cheap vodka. It's embarrassing. And even today, when I drive, years later, when I drive past that Rite Aid, I mean, those memories are as close to fresh as sugar when I think about that moment. So I can go into a grocery store, but I only buy the diet ginger beer.
It was always that thing. I was like, yeah, what time do they close? And when I lived in Oregon, it was like, well, they're state run, so we can't buy liquor on Sunday. So we need to make sure that on Saturday we get there by 7. We buy enough to get through that. Here in California, I moved down here, and it's like the Wild West. They're handle jugs of Maker's Mark for like $12, and Stoli's like on sale for $10, and it's like, it's not, my God, it's insane. But and I don't know if you felt the same way when you were drinking,
No,
or if it was
I was in denial.
Okay.
Just trying to fool myself that I could still do this. I mean, nobody else knew. I mean, I didn't need to tell anybody. It was pretty darn obvious.
Yeah. I would remember, and then I would think back to things like, I always wanted to be in the kitchen making the food if there was a party, because I was always in control of the bottle of wine or the bottle of whiskey, or I could take a pull off of a bottle or pour myself a little bit heavier because I needed it.
Right.
Instead, everyone else is going to be fine, but I need a little bit extra. I need to make sure there's enough for me and that sort of thing. So very much that sort of being.
And everybody thought you were just a good host being in the kitchen. But,
that was it. Exactly.
There was a
Absolutely.
Method to your madness.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't realize that until later because I was like, well, sure, I'm an alcoholic, but, whatever. I pay the rent, right? Hey, man, get off my back. What's the problem? The bills are paid. You got everything you need.
Right.
Leave me alone. And I think that idea of isolation, you were married and you had a family and having to still isolate yourself from people who want to help you.
Right. And then there's that whole the strain that causes on the relationship because your wife doesn't know how to help you. So my wife got angry and running around finding bottles and which caused more strain, with more discomfort. So it only led me to want to use and drink more. So there's just all that pain and strain that goes along with having a relationship in the middle with somebody being addicted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so. And she was not afflicted in the same way.
Never. No, I mean she's a normie. I mean, for all intents and purposes, I mean she can have 2 drinks a night and stop. I don't get it. But
I don't get it either. That's that idea of like I don't want just one.
Yeah.
I want all of them.
Yeah.
Until I can't function anymore.
Yeah. Now I just don't want any. I mean, I don't even. The urge just isn't there because I just get scared of. I know where it goes, so I don't.
Did you find in early and how many years have you been sober?
7 years I've been in recovery.
7 years. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Did you find like temptation and things like that difficult when you first got sober? Like even going through the program and having the rehab, the 60 days and all the steps, was it ever a thing? Did you ever think, oh, maybe I could have a beer or I'll just pop into that Rite Aid?
Yeah, which is what led me when I had to go to rehab again. I mean, I was thinking all those kinds of things. I can do this. I can manage it. Oh, I'll just drink when I go on vacation, but I'll stop when I come back. I mean, it was all that crap.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to go through that a little bit until, I finally went to Altamira and came out the other side and realized that they're just. But I had to experience again enough of the right way and get enough value in return from living that way that I knew that it was going to work for me. Because the fear that entered me when I was coming to the end was that, I have no idea like what I'm going to do now. It's like if I can't use and drink the way I've been using and drinking, what does that look like? I don't know how to live life not drunk and not high. So that was a big part of the fear. And so once I began to get enough reward in a spiritual sense, enough good feelings in return for living the right way, then I began to say, okay, well, I'm starting to get something here. And that's not a greedy thing. It's just more, okay, I'm starting to understand it because I'm getting some feedback that's telling me some good feedback when I feel good about myself, that's telling me, okay, then this is what it's about. Now I'm beginning to understand. And so I think I'll do more of that.
Yes.
But, you're right. I mean, there's definitely periods of time in the first year where it's, it can be touch and go until this whole way of life gets cemented and you develop this muscle memory and you develop the repeatedness of practicing this way that it just becomes who you are.
Yeah, you use the word ritual, and I think that's an important thing because routine is important, but routine I don't think has as much significance as having a ritual. So it's important that I get up and I brush my teeth every day, but there's no ritual behind brushing my teeth.
Yeah.
But when I talk about doing my prayer in the morning, or whether it's meditation or going for a walk, which a lot of times, as far as, exercise and working out, there's a huge mental benefit to it as much as there is physical.
Right.
And
spiritual reward.
Yeah,
So that's
spiritual
the difference
reward.
between a routine and a ritual, is that with a ritual you get a spiritual reward.
Thank you.
And that good feeling that we get, which then builds on itself, which it's like making a spiritual deposit through your heart into your soul, which grows it and allows it to become the primary influence in your life instead of your frickin' ego, in your head.
Which is still, for me, even 3 years on, it's certainly, and I'm by no means, I would still consider 3 years to be early, at least from my vantage point of sobriety. I still struggle with things. My sponsor moved out of town last year, and so it's like, well, shit, I can still call him, but then I start thinking about other things, and I'm like, well, I'm feeling like I need to go talk to somebody else. I need to get another one. I need to go through these steps again. I need to, follow those principles and not allow myself to just kind of go, well, I'm good, because I don't know. I don't feel like that is ultimately, being good is not good enough,
Right.
And so when I feel those feelings of like slacking off, do you have a regular daily routine or rituals that you keep in place? Like, how often do you go to meetings, or do you work with other alcoholics and that kind of stuff to help cement those principles?
Yeah. So I go to typically 3 meetings a week, and I work with a couple of sponsees. And to be quite honest, this business that I have now, I view as a gift from God, as a way to give back and help others. So I view this business as a spiritual practice also, because part of our long-term objective, and we're doing it short-term as well, but is to use the profits of the company to give back and help others. Important causes like addiction treatment and animal rights and things that are near and dear to our heart. But in the short term, we're doing a lot of school fundraising. We're doing Holiday Heroes in the city, where we go, and it's that big benefit for underprivileged kids at the AT&T Park, and we're going to be the ice cream vendor there, giving all the product away, just finding ways, even though we're not profitable, to give back and help others. So every day I get up and I focus on this business, early until late, with the whole sole idea that, ultimately, it's good. This is my vehicle, from God, to give back and help others.
Yeah. It's important to have something, and to, and like you said, that idea of like, oh, what's meaningful to you? And it's like, well, this is my job. And that's not the case at all.
Right.
I was a bartender for 13 years, and the last 3 of those were not meaningful at all.
Right.
It was just, I need to do this to make money, and, finding that sort of way to give back with, being able to talk to you and you coming here and doing this is awesome. And I really appreciate it, but just finding those things that are of value. And there was another speaker had said, if you keep doing the right things in the right place, the right stuff will come to you.
Right.
And that has been it, just in the short period of time that I've been sober, that has absolutely been the case.
Right.
And finding that feeling of like, you have to trust.
Right.
When things are not going the way you think they should be going.
Right. And I think that person was correct. I think if you live by God's principles, live in harmony, try to help others around you, God takes care of those that do that. And you're putting good energy out, and you're emitting good energy, and invariably it circles around back to you. I don't know if you found the same thing, but I used to walk down the street in my disease, and I was giving off such bad energy that I couldn't get people to look at me. Mm-hmm. Nobody would say hi to me. And now I get smiles from pretty much everybody just because unconsciously I'm emitting better energy. And it's just amazing the way that happens. We're all made up of energy, and there's energy all around us. And that's what's happening when people are in community around each other. They're just giving off energy to each other. And it's a big part of what makes us in harmony with others or not, is the type of energy that we're carrying with us.
Yeah.
And so if we're in this isolated world and we're just kind of self-absorbed and focused and in our disease, that's not the kind of energy that anybody else wants to be a part of.
I was definitely, isolation was huge at the very end. Well, more so than just the very end, but at the very end, it was all I wanted to do was be alone and lock myself in my room and drink.
Yeah.
And that was that. The last drink was, the very last drink was a beer on that couch when I had that moment of like, this has got to stop somehow. Like something has to change, because I had this flash and I saw everything. I had just moved into this house. I saw it gone. I had just gotten a new job. I saw it gone. I was, drinking and driving, albeit I didn't work too far away. I was drinking on the job and I was driving home, and I even did it when I lived in Napa and worked in Sonoma. And so all these things, it was like I just saw it, like literally that sort of, all these things are going to be gone if you don't do something.
Yeah.
And
Well, you're one of those rare few that actually stopped before those things did happen.
I am very grateful for that. I don't know if you had any like run-ins with consequences, like severe consequences, legal or otherwise.
Yeah. 3 DUIs over 30 years. Fortunately, they were each a decade apart, but a few different arrests for drunk and disorderly. And my last DUI, I thought that it would be a good idea to take some Ambien to take the edge off the cocaine while I was driving home from Palo Alto in the rain, and ended up falling asleep at the wheel and hitting a parked car that had 2 people in it. Nobody was hurt, but you can just imagine. So yeah, I mean, there's just unbelievable consequences.
It's amazing the rationalizations that we make in those moments. And yeah, I'm so grateful. And I think for a long time too, like early in recovery and even working with my sponsor, and I'd have discussions with him and I'd be really frustrated and I'd be resisting, like you said. And I'd say, so what, maybe I didn't go low enough. What, do I have to go out there and do something horrible? Do I have to go to jail? Do I have to, ruin somebody else's life more so than I already had with, past relationships?
Yeah.
And he said, no, John, calm down. You're fine. It's okay that your bottom wasn't as low as some other people's. But, what a gift to be able to learn from other people and to share, and that people are open enough to share about it.
Right.
And to be able to go, oh, okay, that's all right. So I don't need to go learn that. Somebody else has already done that and is willing to share with me.
Right.
And that's been huge. And so there's not a day that goes by that I don't, thank God,
right.
And for me, that's that idea of, and I make this joke where and you talk about it being a feeling and being an energy, because I do my best, and my joke is that God is kind of like my Craigslist roommate that works opposite hours. We don't always see each other around the house, but as long as I do the dishes and pay the rent, my half of the rent, everything else seems to be fine. So that's kind of how I relate it, because I never had this huge epiphany or anything like that, but it's like, if I do those right things, everything else seems to fall in place.
Right. So that there's the feedback that I think I was talking about, where you're living according to the principles about living life the right way. And I'm sure that's, for you, that's more than just doing the dishes and paying the bills. I'm sure it's doing a lot of, like your podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, you're doing a lot of great service for people. So I'm sure you feel the benefit from doing that in your heart and soul. And so that's why it's things like that that make everything come around to you, because you're helping others and giving back.
Being of service.
Yeah, being of service
is important.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's been what a trip, and what to think. Like, if I had continued, I certainly wouldn't be here talking with you.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know that I would be alive, and I know that this seems very dramatic, but I don't think that people realize when you go, like when somebody meets you and they wouldn't expect that, when you talk about Ambien, cocaine, and car crashes, that those things don't probably emanate from you because that's not you anymore. But
Right.
the severity of those things is real.
Right.
And
well, I saved a picture of myself going into rehab, and I'll show it to you when we finish up
Okay.
here. And it reminds me, if I ever get too far from reality, that of who I was and how close this is. I mean, it bears no resemblance to what I look like today.
the co-host of this podcast, and he was the one who told me, he said, I was asking him, how do I stay sober? Because it was brand new to me, and I wanted to, and I think that was the key thing, recovery's for those who want it, not those who need it.
Right.
But he said, take that last bender of yours and tattoo it on your brain, using that language. And that's what I do now, is
Right.
like, okay, I tattoo it on my brain, and I go, okay, remember that feeling?
Yeah.
Do you remember where you were? Do you remember what the recycle bin sounded like that time where you rolled it out to the street?
Right.
Those kinds of things, Do you remember, just...
And just the fear of how lonely you were, and the pain, emotional and physical. Yeah, I get shivers every time I even get close to that memory, and I don't need to remember much of it. I just begin to go down that road, and I get all the fear I need.
Mm-hmm. There's the job that I worked at, they gave us, it was for a resort, and they gave us like little ID cards, and so they took my picture when I first started working there, which was about 6 weeks before I quit drinking. So there's a picture of me then, and then I remember I took a picture of me like 3 years later or something like that, and I couldn't believe the difference. Like, I hadn't looked at that picture in so long, and I saw it. And, I'm kind of a big dude anyway, but my face was bloated. I swear that my hairline has gotten better. I don't know if that's possible, but maybe it was the
Or your
haircut.
forehead shrunk.
Yeah, exactly. But I was like looking, I looked bald, I looked sad. That smile was not happy, and I was so bloated.
Yeah.
Like, I was just so big and bloated, and it was just such a surprising thing to see those two pictures side by side.
Yeah.
And so that was like that real sort of visceral, tangible evidence of the change that had happened in the last 3 years.
Right. And some people early in recovery begin to wonder, well, was it really as bad as it was? And maybe it wasn't that bad. And when you have side-by-side pictures like you do, and the picture that I have of myself, yeah, it was that bad. Mm-hmm. And there's the evidence. My body was shutting down.
Yeah. Were you hospitalized for anything, or did you?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, I, unlike you, could not stop myself. So I had to go into rehabs and detoxes to get the fluids and so on to, stop the shakes. So hospitalized in that sense. But
Yeah.
I couldn't stop on my own. I didn't have the strength. I needed help.
Yeah, I definitely, I had people that were there to help me as well. Like, I did not do it on my own. The person who lived here before me was in the program. They were a good friend of mine. They left me a nice little book in the nightstands. They encouraged me to go seek outside support. So it was definitely something that I didn't do alone. But yeah, I did not. That was not my. That just wasn't my story.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk to you about and I know that that's not why we're here, but I wanted to talk to you about ice cream. And in specific, because of my personal relationship with ice cream and with sweets. And I don't know if that was something that was an addiction for you along with alcohol, or if it replaced alcohol at any point, because it was kind of, for me, I remember thinking like, oh, well, I can't, I would just eat like 2 pints of ice cream in a night. I would get two, thinking I wouldn't have to go to the store again for a while.
Both, yeah. It's like 2 bottles of wine.
And then I get the Klondike bars because I was like, well, there's 6 of them, right? Or 4 or 6 of them. And I was like, if I have one, then I would like go through sometimes even all 6 of them. Like, so that those behaviors of making sure I didn't go to the same 7-Eleven 2 nights in a row.
Right.
For ice cream.
Yeah, I mean, it mirrors the addictive experience with alcohol and drugs. It's the same battle. So, yeah, I mean, I've always had an addiction to sugar, sweets, but it exacerbated itself when I quit alcohol because there's a lot of sugar in alcohol, as we know, and so my body and my mind were craving other sources of comfort, and so it only escalated. Yeah, I mean, the same with you is if it's at home, it's all free game, and so I was eating just a ton of sweets, chocolate chip cookies, ice cream. If I've never met a sweet I don't like, and so yeah, it was having an effect on my body. I was putting on a lot of weight, and you know, I think it happens to all of us. We're all, a lot of people that are fresh in recovery are hitting the cigarettes, hitting the caffeine, hitting the sweets, anything to give themselves comfort as a replacement for what they're missing with, you know, alcohol and drugs.
Yeah.
So that's part of what led to developing this ice cream, is trying to create a healthier version so that, you know, I could still satisfy that ice cream craving without having all the deleterious effects on the body. So
what did you do prior to this, or what was your skill set or
I'm an entrepreneur, so I create and run businesses.
Okay.
So I'm a partner in a restaurant group currently, and then I have this new ice cream brand.
Okay.
So I just look for different opportunities, and a lot of it's timing, and a lot of it is, you know, right place, right time. And as I said, I met, you know, a trainer who had developed this crude recipe for a high protein ice cream, and then we kind of worked together for a while and made it an entire lifestyle ice cream, and worked with a food scientist, and just made it what we feel is, you know, special with, you know, delivering a great experience with a bunch of health benefit. So, more responsible way to eat ice cream.
Yes, it is.
And I've got to get you some. I'll bring you some.
Sure, I would, you know, and I'd love to come visit out there.
Yeah.
Do you have like a home front for this ice cream? Is there?
No.
Or it's just, but you're out in stores. I mean, you're here in at least 2 places in Sonoma.
Yeah, we sell it in a lot of local markets. We're kind of everywhere north of the bridge, north of the Golden Gate. We're in Marin, Sonoma, Napa counties, and we're growing quickly. The part I think maybe we could just quickly focus on,
yeah, whatever,
about the brand is not so much about the ice cream, but we have 4 main brand tenants, and 2 of them, one is about giving back and helping others, and particularly those who are struggling and need a break, like you and I did. And so through school fundraising and other types of things that we're going to support, you know, that's an important piece of the brand. And so every time somebody buys a pint of this ice cream, hopefully they can feel comfortable that, you know, our intentions are good, our motives are good, and we're going to use those proceeds to help others. Secondly is, you know, our company is run with a culture of harmony, kindness, and compassion. So we try to practice the principles of recovery inside the company, the way that we run it. And part of our social media posting, I do all the posting myself, and I write all the material. And every 4th day we'll post something about that lifestyle. So it's about spirituality. So how can we all be better, you know, citizens of the world? And I transmit a lot of the stuff that I've learned in recovery. So even that quote I just mentioned to you about, does it, the gift of pause, does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? And does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? And does it need to be said at all? Does that, I post that and I write some stuff about it that, how it's helped me in my life. So those are two really important facets of the brand that we're trying to put out there so that we help other people in other ways besides just a healthier alternative to eating ice cream.
Yeah, it's not just about ice cream. Then no, this is...
No, because it needs to be about more than that for
Yeah.
me. Because a big part of this, like I said, it's my spiritual practice, this business. So it can't be about making a big ice cream brand. It has to be about making an ice cream brand that means something and that gives back and helps others. Because, if I go back down that road again where it's about me and about materialism, then I'm right back where I was.
Yeah, they talk about, and we keep coming back to it being a spiritual program and it being such an absolute core part of recovery, which again is a very large pill for a lot of people to swallow. They talk. I have read that things like the opposite of addiction is connection, and they've done some scientific experiments with rats and cocaine water and all that kind of stuff. You probably know all about this.
Right.
And basically it was that the rats that don't need the cocaine because they have family, they have community, that kind of thing.
Right.
They don't go for the drugs.
Right.
So that connection, so that's not only with your fellow human beings, but also finding that spiritual connection.
Right.
And whatever name you give it, like whether it be God or, whatever power is higher than you, I sometimes think about as like my higher self. So
Right.
wherever that exists, that's who I am, maybe
The best version of yourself.
the best version of myself. If that's maybe a prayer, is just like checking in with my higher self and who I imagine will be, again, of the best service to the world.
Right.
Not so much about what will do me best,
Right.
because I already know where that
Right.
goes, where
Right.
that ends up.
Right.
And it doesn't. It has not ended well. It took me 18 years to figure that out.
Right.
But I was super excited the first time I saw it was an Instagram post, and I was like, ice cream, new ice cream in Sonoma at the Broadway Market, and what is this recovery business? And I mean, it was like there was literally something that was speaking to me in that
ice
moment.
Cream and recovery.
Ice cream and recovery. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, is it possible, John, that I mean, I don't know if I'm gonna have to have a fourth step with Ben and Jerry's or what, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that sort of
Right.
that feeling. But it was just like, what an awesome thing, like that was my first thought. And that was when I just reached out and said, hey, wow. And I went to Broadway Market, and the woman behind the counter was talking about it. Oh yeah, we saw, have you had the I think it was, did you have the lemon poppy seed? And I was like, no, I haven't had that one yet. It was my first time there. Oh, that was the one that sold out when they were here tasting, and it was just like, oh, okay, so cool. Like, wow, that's awesome. And then running into you at the at the Sonoma Market.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, this is great.
Yeah. Those aren't coincidences, by the way.
I don't know that. Yeah, I don't believe in them anymore.
No.
But it's such a and it really does. It feels good. Like you're like, oh wow. So whatever it is, whether it's doing a podcast or making ice cream and being able to give something to people who need it and to people who want it, I just think it's a great thing. And that was the connection that I made with you and with what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for reaching out, and any chance I can get to talk recovery and meet a new friend in the program.
Absolutely.
I'm on it.
I might ask you to come back too, if you ever want to, and talk about it more.
Well, I'd love to, but I'm not sure your audience would agree. But we'll find out what the feedback is.
But yeah, and so I wanted to ask you about these two little dogs.
Yeah, well,
There's...
now you're going to get me really excited. Yeah, so Midgie and Maggie, they're they've just been so important and meaningful in my life of recovery because, life can be difficult and we have our everyday stressors, but with them around every day, I can go to them as one of my tools and spend time with them, and they open my heart back up and they bring me right back to what's important. And I watch them operate and I watch them live, and they're just happy. There's no resentments on their part. They don't hold grudges. They're just beautiful little things, and they teach me a lot. And like I said, they're one of my tools of recovery, where I can go to them and they give me so much in terms of serenity and joy and peace and love, and they help me love. So they're just, my heart just swells when I think of them. So they're really important, parts of my recovery, Midgie and Maggie.
Animals are pretty great that way.
Yeah.
I've got a couple families of deer that live around here, and they kind of come out and we just kind of stand around and hang out, and it's just a very quiet moment, and they don't, like you said, they don't have resentments or hold grudges or any of that stuff.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and there's energy transmitting between you and those deer. That there's a connection between you. That it's just a beautiful thing. And in our life and our disease, like I go right by those things. I don't make connections with anything. And look at how much of life that we would have been missing out on. And, how much beauty there is to connecting with all living things, not just human beings.
It's very, very true. Thank you, George.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It's
John,
really
my
nice,
pleasure.
getting to sit and talk with somebody about recovery. So it's one of my favorite things, and I don't feel like I do it enough. So
yeah. Well, this counts as a meeting. So
yes.
We got a meeting.
All right. That's good. That's good.
Meeting is two guys talking recovery.
Exactly.
Yeah.
One drunk helping another. I appreciate it.
Exactly. Anytime.
Oh, all right. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with George Haymaker III, the founder of Rethink Ice Cream. We had a really great time together. I had a list of questions that I had typed up, and before we even hit record, he said, "Hey man, can you just turn that over and let's have a conversation?" And I'm so glad that he did. It came out really well. It felt really good. It was really inspiring, and he even brought me some samples of ice cream, and I gotta tell you, they're delicious. So thanks again for listening. This is John from A is for Alcoholic. You can find us on all the platforms that matter at A is for Alcoholic. Our music is by Neglect. You can find his stuff at neglect.bandcamp.com, and you can reach us at aisforalcoholic@gmail.com. Have a great day.